I want you to picture a specific scenario. It's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're in a conference room or,
Good guess. A Zoom call.
yeah, a Zoom call, which honestly is even worse.
It's definitely worse.
And the energy is just dead. The project is stalled out. People are checking their phones under the desk.
The morale is completely subterranean.
Subterranean, exactly.
Yeah.
It literally feels cold in the room.
Yeah, the classic corporate freezer. We've all been there.
Right. But then one person enters that dynamic. And they don't necessarily tell a joke, and they certainly don't bark an order. But the moment they engage, the temperature in the room physically seems to shift. The lights feel brighter. People sit up. And by the end of that hour, the same team that was ready to quit is suddenly ready to run through a brick wall.
You're talking about the human spark plug.
The human spark plug. And usually we just write this off as charisma, or maybe they had too much coffee. But today, we're looking at a set of data that says, no, this isn't magic. This is actual mechanics.
It is mechanics. It's a very specific architectural blueprint of human personality.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into the Max Energy ME80 personality system. And specifically, we're unpacking one of the most dynamic profiles in their entire catalog, the WWFN, also known as the emotional Brightener.
And if you're listening right now and you think, oh, I know someone exactly like that, or wait, is that me? Buckle up.
Yeah.
Because while this profile is absolutely brilliant, the data shows it comes with a very, very high burn rate.
Right, the hidden costs. But before we get into the specifics of the emotional Brightener, let's just briefly set the stage with the system itself.
Sure.
We're looking at the Max Energy ME80 system. Now, for those who haven't heard us discuss this before, this isn't your standard, put you in a neat little box personality test, is it?
No, not at all. Most personality tests look at behavior, like what you do. The ME80 system looks at energy flow, why you do it.
The underlying engine?
Exactly. It treats the human personality like an electrical circuit. It maps out how you process information, how you make decisions, and crucially, how you manifest that energy out into the world. It's the architecture of your internal wiring.
I really love that distinction. We aren't looking at the paint job on the car. We are opening the hood and looking at the engine block.
Right.
And today's engine is the emotional Brightener. So let's start at the very top with the identity and core declaration. What is the headline for this specific person?
So the report defines their core essence with this hero declaration, and I'll quote, "It reignites fading warmth, using heartfelt emotion to move people forward together."
Reignites fading warmth. That's a very specific phrasing. It implies that their natural habitat is actually
Coldness.
Coldness, yeah.
That's a really key insight right off the bat. You don't need a heater in the middle of a desert.
Yeah.
The emotional Brightener, or the summoner archetype, as they're sometimes called, is fundamentally designed to detect entropy.
Okay.
Their primary function isn't to, analyze data spreadsheets or build rigid structures. Their superpower is emotional summoning.
Summoning. That almost implies they're pulling something out of thin air.
Well, in a way, they kind of are. They ignite action through genuine feeling. And I really want to stress the word genuine here.
It's not a tactic.
Exactly. This isn't the sleazy salesperson putting on a fake smile to close a deal. The ME80 data suggests that this profile actually feels the emotion they're projecting. They don't just tell you to move. They create an emotional resonance that makes you genuinely want to move.
So if an analyst type, say, moves people with logic like, we should do X, because the data says Y, the emotional Brightener, moves people with resonance.
Precisely. They have an internal radar for the warmth level of a space.
Right.
If a family gathering feels awkward or a team is just sort of drifting apart, they perceive that disconnect instantly. And unlike some of us who might think, oh, this is awkward, I'm going to go hide in the kitchen.
Guilty as charged.
Right. The Brightener steps in. They regroup hearts through pure authenticity.
I like that phrase, regrouping hearts. But let's play devil's advocate for just a second here. In a professional setting, isn't that just a distraction? Like, do we really need warmth to get a spreadsheet done?
That's the million-dollar question. And the ME80 system argues yes, absolutely, because warmth is energy. Without that emotional cohesion, you get friction. The emotional Brightener is the grease in the gears. But to really understand how they do it, we have to look at their control mechanism.
Right, the control mechanism and global view. The report lists a 3-step process for how they control their environment.
Yeah, it's a beat, almost like a musical rhythm. Ignite, advance, rapidly manifest.
Ignite, advance, rapidly manifest.
That sounds fast.
It is incredibly fast. And this is where they really differ from the planners.
The people who need to map everything out.
Right. Some profiles need to sit back, retreat to their office, simulate 10 different outcomes, and then maybe act. The emotional brightener operates on this acute inner perception.
Like a gut feeling.
Like a spark. Usually a reaction to that cold room we talked about.
Yeah.
And they immediately translate that spark into powerful emotional expression to create waves of action.
So they control the room by essentially setting the tempo. They are the conductor. But they aren't conducting with a little baton, they're conducting with their own energy field. They control the philosophy of the group, not by creating rigid rules, but by creating an atmosphere that dictates behavior.
Okay, I want to get under the hood now. One of the things that makes the Max Energy ME80 system so unique is this energy matrix.
Oh yeah, the stack.
Yeah, it breaks the human personality down into a stack: IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation. It's like looking at the wiring diagram of a motherboard.
It's the best way to move past the flush and understand the why. You can't fix the car if you don't know what the parts actually do.
Exactly. So let's break down this stack for the emotional brightener, starting at the very bottom. The IP layer, or inner value layer. The report defines this as risk perception activation.
This is so fascinating to me. Usually when we hear risk perception, we instantly think of anxiety. We think of someone who is afraid to make a move.
Right, playing it safe.
But for the emotional brightener, risk is fuel.
Fuel. How does that work?
Their internal battery starts charging when they sense stakes. The risk here isn't just physical danger or losing money. It's the risk of loss.
Loss of what?
The risk that the team is losing hope. The risk that the connection between people is breaking, the risk that the project is going to just die of apathy. That perception triggers their engine.
So everything is fine and dandy, and everyone is happy.
They might actually be bored.
Really?
Yeah, they might be somewhat dormant. But the moment they sense, uh-oh, we're losing the room, the IP layer activates. It essentially says, something is at risk here, wake up. It's an internal alarm system that demands an immediate response.
Okay, so the internal alarm goes off.
Mm-hmm.
Now we move up to the IQ layer, the emotional activation layer. This is the processing unit.
Right. The report calls this risk and consequence assessment.
See, this is where I struggle a bit. We usually associate IQ with logic, math, spatial reasoning. But here, it's being applied to feelings.
Think of it as emotional calculus.
Emotional calculus.
Yeah, once that inner alarm goes off, their IQ layer rapidly assesses the entire emotional landscape of the room. They are actively calculating the consequences of inaction.
Like playing out the tape.
Exactly. Like, if I don't fix the mood in this room right now, we lose the client. Or if I don't cheer this specific person up, they're going to quit next week.
So it's highly strategic. It's not just, I have a lot of feelings and I need to cry right now. It's more like I understand the causal chain of these emotions.
Exactly. It's high-speed processing of emotional cause and effect. They are mapping out the future based entirely on current emotional data.
That makes a lot of sense. And that leads us to the EQ layer, the decision calculation layer. Now, this is usually where people make a pro and con list, but the emotional brightener does something very weird here.
This is honestly my favorite part of this profile. For them, the decision is the expression. The layer is literally called emotional expression and release.
The decision is the expression. Unpack that for me. Does that mean they can't decide things silently?
In many ways, yes. They don't calculate a decision silently in their head and then just file a quiet report. The actual process of making the decision involves releasing that emotion.
Interesting.
To decide is to express. If they are holding it in, they haven't really decided yet. They need to talk it out, emote it out, get it externalized.
That explains so much about certain colleagues I've had. The ones who seem to think out loud, but with really high intensity.
That's the WWFN profile. They are processing the decision through the act of releasing the energy. It's not a malfunction, it's their methodology.
And finally, the top of the stack, the manifestation layer. This is what the world actually sees.
Right. Energy released outward impact, action, manifestation. The result of that entire stack, spotting the risk, assessing the consequence, expressing the emotion, is an immediate, tangible impact on the world.
They make things happen.
They manifest change by externalizing that internal spark we talked about.
So the wiring is literally built to take an internal feeling and turn it into an external reality. And fast.
Instantaneously. There's very little lag time between feeling and doing.
Okay, so we know how the engine works. Now let's look at the car out on the road. The report has a section called Deep Analysis of Inner Traits. There's a core quality highlighted here. Emotion lights the path.
This completely flips the traditional corporate script on its head. Traditional training tells us data first, emotion later.
Check your emotions at the door.
Get the facts, then decide how you feel. The emotional brightener operates on the exact inverse mechanism. First emotion moves, then action follows.
They don't need a spreadsheet.
No, they don't need a spreadsheet to initiate movement, they need a feeling. The report highlights that they have this incredible ability to translate abstract visions into stories infused with warmth.
Can we ground this? What does translating abstraction into warmth actually look like in, say, a boardroom?
Sure. Imagine a startup. They're running out of cash. It's a dire situation. A purely data-driven leader, maybe an analyst type, stands up and says, "We have 3 months of runway. We need to cut costs by 12% to survive."
Accurate, but cold?
Very cold. It induces fear. Now, the emotional brightener looks at that exact same abstraction, the risk of failure, and translates it into a story.
How so?
They might say, "Look around this room. We are the underdogs here. Remember why we started this in the garage. We are fighting for something that actually matters. We are going to tighten our belts not because we're scared, but because we want to win."
They turn the what into a why.
They make the team willing to invest their energy. That's the critical difference. The report mentions they are particularly effective in the crisis moment.
The do-or-die situations.
That is their command time. When there is drift, hesitation, or low morale, they gather that scattered emotion and focus it into a shared direction. They transform abstraction into a felt reality.
But lighting up a room takes a massive amount of voltage. If you are a light bulb, eventually the filament is going to burn out. We need to talk about the shadow blind spots.
Yeah, this is the critical warning label on the WWFN package.
The report calls this shadow, burning too bright, too fast.
It's the basic physics of personality. High output requires high input. And the trap here is what the ME80 system calls dependency on feedback.
How does that actually manifest for them?
Well, because their core mechanism is outputting warmth to get a reaction, they rely entirely on that reaction to know they're functioning properly.
Oh, I see.
If they output warmth and the room stays cold, if they face what we call a cold moment, they don't just brush it off and think, well, tough crowd. They spiral.
They take it personally.
Deeply personally. They start to doubt their own light. They think, am I broken? Why isn't this working? They rely on the reflection of their own light to know they are okay. If there is no reflection, they feel practically invisible.
Man, that sounds incredibly vulnerable.
It is, and it leads directly to the second trap, the commitment trap.
Is this the overpromising issue?
It is. Remember, they operate in these intense emotional peaks. In the heat of the moment, when the energy is high and everyone is excited, they'll say, yes, I'll do that. We can totally fix that. I'll lead that committee.
And then Tuesday morning rolls around.
Exactly. The emotion has faded. The adrenaline is completely gone. But the commitment remains. They end up piling up work for themselves because they promised things when their energy was at a peak, not realizing they can't sustain that peak forever.
I felt that one personally.
Mm-hmm.
There is also this concept in the report of the atmosphere carrier. I found this really poignant.
It's a heavy burden they carry. Because they know they can change the temperature of the room, they start to feel they must change it.
Always on duty.
If a dinner party is quiet, they feel it's their fault. If a meeting is boring, they have to fix it.
So they become the designated entertainer.
Or the designated lifter. This makes it very, very hard for them to admit when they are tired. They hide their fatigue and just crank up the intensity, basically faking the brightness. And that leads to massive crash and burnout. They are terrified that if they stop shining, the room goes dark.
Let's shift gears slightly to how this plays out in social dynamics. I assume these people are popular, right? They sound like the life of the party.
They definitely are. The report actually calls them the center of gravity. There's a phrase here, proximity brings illumination. In social settings, they appear radiant. They naturally become the hub of the wheel. People feel cared for, seen, and propelled by them.
But knowing what we now know about the shadow side, isn't that exhausting?
That's the double-edged sword. The report notes, distance allows integration.
Distance allows integration.
Yeah. While people love being around them, the emotional brightener actually needs distance to regulate their own system.
They need to just be alone.
Desperately. If they are always on, always the center of attention, they get pulled into severe imbalance. They become almost a caricature of themselves, always performing, never resting. They need to step back to let their own energy settle.
That's really good advice for any friends of emotional brighteners listening right now. If your friend who is usually the loud, happy one goes quiet for a few days, just let them.
Let them. Don't constantly ask, what's wrong? Why aren't you fun today? Give them the space they need to reboot.
Okay, let's talk business. We've touched on leadership a bit, but let's get concrete here. What is the specific business value of this profile? If I'm a CEO, why am I actively hiring a WWFNS?
You hire them for emotional mobilization. That is their primary business asset. Look, in business, we often have the strategy, we have the product, and we have the budget. But what we lack is the will to execute.
Right. The strategy is sitting in a PDF somewhere, and no one actually cares.
Exactly. This profile bridges the gap between the static PDF and the actual action.
So where do they fit best in a corporate structure?
Think about the start of things. Launch meetings, briefings, large-scale events, anywhere you need to take a group of people from a state of rest inertia to a state of action momentum.
So getting the ball rolling.
The report notes that they don't just cheerlead, though. They channel that feeling into executable next steps.
That's a key distinction, because a cheerleader just yells, "Go team," and does a backflip. Emotional Brightener says, "We can do this, and here's the very first step we are going to take together."
Correct. They restore morale, but they also focus hearts on the objective.
So if I'm looking at a career map for this profile, what are the recommended professional fields?
The report suggests 4 main areas where this energy truly thrives, rather than just burns out. First is brand and market mobilization.
So like new product launches, brand storytelling.
Anything where you need to get the broader market excited, you definitely want a WWFN holding the microphone at the big product reveal.
Makes total sense. What's the second field?
Organizational launch. This is more internal. Running year-end gatherings, pledge rallies, internal facilitation. They are the ones who can actually get a cynical sales team fired up for Q1.
Which is the hardest job in the world.
It is, but they absolutely love it. Third is education and training, but specifically what the report calls highly contagious inspirational instruction.
So we're not talking about the lecturer just monotonously reading from a textbook.
No, we're talking about the Dead Poet Society teacher, the one who stands on the desk. They are the teacher you remember 20 years later because they made you love the subject. They transfer their passion directly to you.
And the fourth field?
Community building, team building, crowdfunding, nonprofit leadership, any role where you essentially need to gather people around a common cause and keep them there.
It really is all about the gathering for them. They are the glue.
They are the fire the tribe gathers around.
We've covered a lot of ground here today, from the inner wiring of risk perception all the way to the outer manifestation of community building. But I want to leave you, the listener, with something to really chew on. The report has this gold sentence, a final piece of wisdom for this specific profile.
This is such a beautiful thought to end on, especially for any emotional brighteners listening who might be feeling that burnout we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The report concludes with this. True maturity lies in igniting others while reserving one light that need not blaze constantly, allowing warmth to persist.
Reserving one light that need not blaze constantly. That is profound.
It's all about sustainability. You don't have to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. You can be the light, but you have to actively protect the wick.
That distinction between blazing and warming seems so crucial. Blazing is impressive, but it's temporary. Warmth is sustainable.
Exactly. If you burn at 100% intensity, you might last an hour. If you learn to modulate that warmth, you can lead for a lifetime.
If you see yourself in this profile, if you're the one everyone always looks to when the room goes cold, or if you know a colleague who fits this description perfectly, understanding these mechanics is a complete game changer.
It really is. It moves you from just reacting to your personality, being a victim of your own energy spikes, to actually mastering it.
And just a reminder for everyone listening, this deep dive is based on the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It's a massive, highly comprehensive system, and honestly, we've only scratched the surface of this one profile today.
There are 80 profiles in the system.
80.
And the interactions between them are incredibly complex. If you want to understand your own wiring or see the full report, you should definitely check out the official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
And for our listeners who want to join the discussion online, you can find them on Facebook. Just search for Max Energy, that's M-A-X Energy Ju Nangliang Ren Gishu, or you can search for Met Energy Nangliang Ren Gishin Lishu.
There is a whole community over there exploring these exact dynamics. It's definitely worth checking out.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the architecture of warmth. To all the emotional brighteners out there, keep shining, but please don't forget to take a break and let someone else carry the lamp for a while. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.